Elisa Maurin is a 23-year-old French artist carving out her path in the world of contemporary art. Known for her abstract paintings and installation pieces, she brings a fresh emotional perspective to every canvas she touches. Originally from the sun-soaked region of Provence, Elisa developed an early love for color space and movement elements that now define her unique style. After earning her degree from the University of the Arts in Strasbourg, she exhibited in several small galleries across France and Spain, steadily building her reputation as a promising young talent. Recently, Elisa relocated to Barcelona, hoping to find new inspiration and opportunities in the city's vibrant art scene. But beyond her talent, what truly sets Elisa apart is her compassion. In 2005, she organized a charity art sale to support victims of the devastating wildfires in Greece, a gesture that revealed her deep empathy and sense of social responsibility. Whether through bold brushstrokes or quiet acts of kindness, Elisa Maurin is an artist who creates not just to express but to connect. In June 2006, Elisa Maurin took a break from her studio life and joined a small getaway to southern Spain. She traveled with a group of close friends, her stepfather Henri Vallon and his partner Clara. Their destination was a remote wildlife reserve near the Guadalquivir River, a place known for its raw beauty and ecological significance. They stayed in a simple wooden cabin by the water's edge, nestled near what was once a vast wetland. The area had recently undergone a major ecological restoration, bringing life back to a once degraded landscape. Now it thrived with native plants and wildlife, offering a peaceful, immersive experience far from city noise. Days were slow and quiet, filled with outdoor activities like kayaking along the calm river and watching animals in their natural habitat. Flocks of birds passed overhead, and wild deer sometimes appeared near the edge of the forest. For Elisa, the trip was more than just a vacation. It was a rare moment of calm and reflection. Surrounded by nature and supported by people she cared about, she found a space to recharge and quietly observe the world around her. The quiet rhythm of the wilderness, the muted colors of water and reeds would later echo in her work. It was a pause but a meaningful one. That afternoon the group spent hours paddling and swimming in the warm, crystal-clear waters of the Guadalquivir River. Laughter echoed across the surface as they soaked in the peace of the reserve. At one point, Elisa and Clara pulled their kayaks onto a small sandbank to rest, letting the others continue downstream. After a short break, Elisa decided to return to their riverside cabin on her own. Curious and confident, she slipped into the water with her snorkeling gear, letting the gentle current guide her back. What she didn't know, what no one could have imagined, was that something dangerous lurked nearby. Hidden beneath the calm surface was a Nile crocodile, an aggressive predator native to Africa. It wasn't supposed to be there. Authorities would later suspect it had been released into the wild from an illegal breeding facility. Even worse, it was breeding season, a time when crocodiles become territorial and easily provoked. As Elisa swam through a still-shaded section of the river, she unknowingly passed near its hiding spot. In an instant, the calm was shattered. The crocodile surged from the depths with terrifying speed and force. Elisa didn't see it coming. The predator struck with primal instinct, triggered by movement and the intrusion into its space. What began as a tranquil afternoon in nature turned suddenly violently into a nightmare underwater. The attack was swift and brutal. The crocodile clamped down on Elisa's head and upper body, dragging her beneath the water without warning. Clara's scream pierced the stillness, a raw cry of horror that echoed through the trees. Henry and a friend, hearing the panic, immediately turned their kayaks around and rushed back upstream. What they found was a nightmare. Elisa was nowhere in sight, only a swirl of blood in the water and violent splashing beneath the surface. Without hesitation, Henry and his friend dove in. They spotted the crocodile thrashing near the riverbed, Elisa's limp body still in its jaws. Fueled by desperation, the two men launched themselves at the animal, punching it, striking its head, clawing at its eyes, anything to force it to release her. It was a terrifying struggle against a creature far stronger and more at home in the water, but finally wounded and startled, the crocodile let go and vanished into the murky depths. They pulled Elisa to the surface and back to shore, but it was too late. She was unconscious, her body limp and motionless. Despite every effort to revive her, Elisa had already succumbed to her injuries and drowned. The rescue was heroic, but it couldn't undo the horror of what had happened. What began as a quiet day in nature had ended in unthinkable tragedy. Elisa's death sent shockwaves through the local community and beyond. News of a Nile crocodile killing a young woman in a Spanish wildlife reserve was both horrifying and surreal. Authorities acted swiftly. The reserve was shut down immediately and an emergency investigation was launched. Environmental officials soon confirmed what had long been whispered. Illegal exotic animal breeding was happening in the region, and at least one Nile crocodile had been released into the wild. This was no freak accident, it was a preventable tragedy. Experts had warned about the dangers of introducing non-native predators into fragile ecosystems, but those warnings had gone largely ignored. Henry's injuries, deep bite marks on his arms and torso, matched the bite pattern of a Nile crocodile, proving the species involved. A massive search followed. Days later, wildlife officers finally located and captured the crocodile alive after a tense operation involving traps and drones. The animal was relocated to a secure facility. Though the immediate threat was removed, the damage was done. Elisa's death became a powerful warning. It exposed the dark underbelly of illegal wildlife trade in Europe and the high cost of human negligence. For many, her story became a rallying cry for stricter controls and real accountability in how exotic animals are handled across the continent. Elisa Maurin's story is a stark reminder of the real dangers behind illegal wildlife trade and the reckless release of exotic species into fragile ecosystems. What happened on that quiet river in southern Spain wasn't just a personal loss. It was a failure of oversight, of responsibility, of action. Elisa's legacy now speaks louder than any painting. It calls for stricter laws, stronger enforcement, and a collective awareness that no wild creature belongs in the wrong place. We owe her more than remembrance, we owe her change. David and Eleanor Matthews had spent decades in service, he as a doctor, she as a school principal, anchored in the calm suburbs of Perth, Australia. Their days were filled with responsibility, routine, and raising 2 children. But behind the steady rhythm of their lives pulls the shared dream Africa. Not the glossy version seen in travel brochures, but the raw, untamed heart of the continent, the rustle of elephants at dusk, the roar of lions across the plain, the endless sky stretching over the Okavango Delta. Now retired, and with their children grown, the timing was finally right. They weren't looking for luxury lodges or curated safaris. They wanted something real, something that would shake loose the dust of years spent working and waiting. Through a small Sydney-based ecotourism company, they booked a 10-day expedition into one of Botswana's largest wildlife reserves. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a promise to their younger selves finally fulfilled. The first 4 days of the safari were nothing short of breathtaking. From the moment David and Eleanor stepped into the wild, they were immersed in a world that felt untouched by time. Early mornings began at waterholes, where they sat in silent awe as lions, zebras, and antelopes gathered side by side, natural rivals temporarily united by thirst. The dry heat shimmered in the air, and the sound of hooves crunching gravel echoed around them, interrupted only by the low growl of a lion or the sudden scatter of startled birds. One afternoon they took a boat ride along the Chobe River, drifting past sunbathing crocodiles with jaws agape, motionless in the heat. Herds of elephants splashed nearby calves tumbling in the water, their trumpets rising in playful bursts. David, camera in hand, could barely keep up with the moments unfolding around them. Eleanor simply watched eyes wide, taking it all in. But it was the jeep safaris through the thick bush that truly burned into their memories. Their guide maneuvered expertly through winding dirt tracks, pointing out leopards lounging in the high branches, hyenas slinking through tall grass, and baboons chattering in the trees above. Every turn held a surprise rare birds, flashing brilliant colors, the sudden appearance of a giraffe's long neck above the trees, or the rustle of something unseen watching them back. By the end of day 4, they weren't just observers, they felt deeply part of the wild rhythm of the land. Day 5 brought the most thrilling part of the trip, the bushwalk. It was the kind of experience David and Eleanor had imagined for years, a raw, ground-level journey into the heart of the wilderness. No vehicle, no noise, just boots on dry earth, and the sharp awareness that they were no longer passive spectators. Their group consisted of 6 travelers, led by 2 experienced guides, both armed not for show, but as a necessary precaution in such an unpredictable environment. The walk began just after sunrise when the air was still cool and the bush teemed with early movement. As they moved single file through dense thickets and open plains, the guides pointed out subtle signs of life. Most people would miss the deep imprint of a buffalo's hoof in the mud, a scattering of feathers where a hunt had ended, or a cluster of eggs in a hidden nest. They learned to read droppings like clues in a story, identifying which animals had passed through recently and even how long ago. Every step carried the thrill of the unknown. Eleanor found herself scanning the treetops for signs of movement, while David crouched beside a termite mound, fascinated by the delicate balance of life it supported. A support vehicle trailed far behind them, carrying food, water, and medical supplies, comforting but out of sight and mind. Out here, every sound mattered. Every snapped twig had weight. It was nature unfiltered, and they felt more alive than they had in years. Later that afternoon, the group paused to rest beside a narrow offshoot of the main river. The sun beat down steadily, and the sound of cicadas buzzed in the air. It seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful. One of the guides furrowed his brow, scanning the stillness. He whispered that the silence felt wrong. In the wild quiet often meant danger. Still, a pod of hippos was visible at a safe distance, half submerged and snorting in the water. The guide judged it safe enough for a brief stop, and the group began snapping photos. Eleanor, drawn by the golden light filtering through the tall reeds, drifted a few steps closer to the edge of the clearing. She stood nearest to a dense cluster of papyrus, framing her shot, unaware of the massive shape lurking within. Suddenly, a rustle, low and sharp, cut through the stillness. The lead guide's voice rose, instantly calm but firm. Everyone back now. A bit later, the reeds exploded. A full-grown male hippo charged from the thicket, its jaws wide eyes locked on Eleanor. Chaos erupted. Cameras dropped, someone yelled, and Eleanor stumbled back, frozen for half a second too long. The guide nearest her stepped forward, arms raised, shouting loudly to divert the hippo's charge. It worked for a tense moment. The animal hesitated, then splashed back toward the water with a thunderous crash. No one spoke for several seconds. The danger had passed, but the air stayed heavy. Eleanor's hands were shaking. She had never been so close to something so wild and so deadly. The calm shattered in an instant. Without warning, the bull hippo exploded from the water, like a torpedo, a blur of muscle and fury. It closed the short gap, barely 4 meters in seconds. No time to run, no time to react. Eleanor turned at the last moment, eyes wide, but the beast was already on her. The first bite came fast and final. The hippo's massive jaws clamped down with unimaginable force, crushing Eleanor's upper body, her head, chest, and shoulders in a single sickening snap. The sound was not one anyone in the group would ever forget. Her body jerked violently as the hippo thrashed, tossing her like a rag doll, then slamming her back down into the muddy riverbank. David stood frozen. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He simply stared, locked in place by disbelief and horror, as the woman he had loved for more than 4 decades was torn apart before his eyes. There was no time to say her name, no chance for goodbye, only the awful, irreversible truth unfolding in front of him. One of the guides acted fast, grabbing David by the arm and dragging him back away from the chaos. "We have to move," The guide said, voice sharp but controlled. The others followed wide-eyed and shaking. No one looked back. The jungle, once full of life, now felt silent and haunted. What had begun as a dream had just become a nightmare, raw, brutal, and unbearably real. When the hippo finally backed off, it released Eleanor's body with a violent jerk, flinging her to the side like discarded debris. Then, just as suddenly as it had attacked the animal, turned and lumbered back into the water, disappearing beneath the surface without a sound. The group hesitated, not knowing if it was truly over, until one of the guides cautiously approached Eleanor's motionless form. She was still breathing barely, shallow, labored gasps. Her body was mangled, soaked in blood, her chest caved in from the force of the bite. David dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering uselessly, not knowing where to touch, what to say. Her eyes fluttered open for a second, then closed. No words came. The guys acted quickly, radioing the support vehicle and rushing to lift her gently into the jeep. David climbed in with her, holding her hand, even as her grief faded. She died minutes later, just as the engine roared to life, her final breath slipping out in silence. There was no dramatic moment, no last look, just stillness. For David, the rest of the world faded into background noise. The buzzing insects, the heat, the murmurs of the others, it all vanished. Eleanor was gone. What had begun as a long-awaited adventure, a celebration of their freedom and love, had ended in unimaginable loss. Africa had always been their dream, a place they had longed for. But now for David, it would forever be remembered as the place where the dream died. This isn't just a story about wildlife, it's a story about respect. Respect for nature, for silence, for distance. Respect for the reality that no matter how careful or prepared we are guests in the wild, not its masters. If you're planning a safari or any journey into remote wilderness, take nothing for granted. Listen to the guides, watch for the signs. When the bush goes quiet, understand what that might mean. Nature doesn't offer second chances.